I usually start the tours. The first one I think we had 6 or 7 showed up. The second one we had 40 some, 45 or so. And last year we had 75 or 80. It was a lot. I was amazed at the size. And that told me that there was interest in this cemetery. I've been in Memphis since '74, and I'd heard off and on for years about the Raleigh Cemetery, but I had never been out here until sometime in the early 1990s. One day I drove out here, and I came up and I read the little sign there, and I looked in here, and I thought, no way, and I just kept on driving. It was so overgrown. This part wasn't too bad, but it was in the middle of the summer, and the weeds were knee-high. A woman I worked with at Bolton High School just kind of knew of my interest in Elmwood, and she told me about a project that her son had done at the Raleigh Cemetery, an Eagle Scout project, which was ultimately this was created as a result of that project. And she said, "Oh, you need to go out there," because she knew of my interest in history. And so one day I'm coming back from school, I did swing by here, and I did come in that time. And I'd been at Elmwood for a year or so before that time, and I started looking at some of these stones in here, and I really wasn't all that impressed. I thought, well, this is no big deal. They're not all that old. There's much older things, grander things at Elmwood. And I got back into what I call the old section, and I started seeing the dates on some of the stones. And it just blew me away, because there are stones back there that way preceded Elmwood. As far as plots of land and public gathering places, this is the oldest intact one that I know of in Shelby County. The McGivney House, I think, dates from the 1830s. I don't know when the first burial was here, but we know there was one in 1831 because the stone still exists over there. So this has been a public burial ground for most of the history of Shelby County. And it is largely, not completely, largely still intact. I love Elmwood, and I try never, ever, ever to compare those two cemeteries. They were never intended to be the same type of cemeteries. Elmwood was laid out to be a garden-type park. This was laid out randomly as a rural burial ground. So we're going to kind of mosey on up down the path here and go up into what I call the old section. In 1948, a woman named Ida Cooper came out here with her daughter, and she sort of created a map of sorts, a written map of what she saw that day. And it pretty much started in here. Unfortunately, and she was fairly accurate. And that was my original guide out here. I would kind of go to where she had seen a stone, and hopefully I would find it. And then she would say, move 3 paces to the right, and a lot of times I wouldn't find it there. But she was pretty accurate, and it kind of gave me an idea of who she saw here, or whose stones she saw here at that time. Now this is one stone, Kevin remembers this one, that was in 3 different pieces. This was tipped over, and the top was broken, and it was a mess. This was one that was repaired, and then it was altered after it was repaired. This is one of the things that just makes me sick when I come out here. If you just come around the front here, you can see how it generally should look. This wasn't even one of my best jobs, but this Dumo 10, the mortar that we put on, is actually, it will be here after this stone has evaporated and gone back into the earth. But when you're putting it on, it obviously smears out, but you wash it off, and it generally leaves a pretty good seam. If you're really, really good at this, which I'm not, you learn how to dye this and put dye the mortar, or put a ground up stone dyed in these cracks. Maybe I'll learn how to do that one day, but I'm not that good enough. Someone came along after I was out here that day and decided to fill in all these cracks and just smeared Dumo 10 around the stone. That will never ever come off, but it's still a far better cry from the way it was. She laid it in a mud puddle here is what she was doing for a long time. Most of these graves were put in concrete bases with a slit in them, and then the stone was just set in the slit. Well, over the years, a lot of those bases would break, and then the stone would fall. So if at some point in time we found out that Asa was actually buried over there, all I would have to do is I could just lift this up, no damage has been done to the stone, and put him in a new base over there. But he's kind of an interesting fellow in that he was a lawyer in Raleigh. But Mr. Hallam says that Asa went back up north. He was from Pennsylvania. Said he went back up north and died in the Civil War. Well, it looks to me like he died in Raleigh in 1859. Mr. Rawlings was the 2nd, 4th, and the 5th. During the 1830s, he was mayor several times. But After Marcus Winchester, he was the second mayor of Memphis. He was crude, crusty, and controversial, very opinionated. But even the people who didn't particularly like him as mayor, I think, agreed that he was an honest, well-intended man who had the best intentions for Memphis. Before he died, when he wrote his will, though, he said he didn't want to be buried in Memphis. He wanted to be buried out in the country under a willow tree in the nice clear air. You know? So he was brought out here. A lot of I've read some places they said that he was buried in the Winchester Cemetery. Well, obviously his stone is here, so I think his will was followed and he was brought out here to be buried. All of these are all the King family. J.W. King was a wagon maker in Raleigh, and they buried the kids, boom, 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 boom. Everybody's here except I'm sure J.W. is here also, probably right in there. He was the last one to die. As I said, a lot of times the last one didn't get a gravestone. They were very good about marking their graves. These all could be read pretty easily if they were clean. 3 or 4 of them have been properly set. They're just stuck in the ground, but they are intact. And most of the footstones, ironically, have been found for these people. So that's a nice example of very simple, very inexpensive. They were, obviously he was a wagon maker. They weren't rich, but they were good at marking their graves. And it's kind of sad you see the dates on these children. Right? This is what they call Gothic, a Gothic style of stone. If you get when the light is right, you can very clearly see that it was Alexander Baby and died in 1831. Margaret Alexander was the mother of that child. And this was, I believe, my memory serves me right, Margaret's sister. And there clearly are footstones here for these two. The baby, I don't know if it ever had a footstone. But it would be a shame if these were ever broken, because they're Gothic stones, and that little one being the fact that it's the oldest one that documents a date in this cemetery. Now this plot over here is the Shelby plot. Actually, the Shelby, the Rudisill, and the Henry plot. Shelby County was named after his uncle, Isaac Shelby. John Milton Shelby, Amanda Shelby Rudisill was her maiden name. And behind her are Rudisills, and behind them are the Henrys. And this is one of my hopeful projects for the summer, if we can keep the plot clean enough to work in. Because there's 2, 3, 4, 5 stones, I believe, laying on the ground back there. And I want to get them, if possible, into new bases and erected before they get lost again. This stone was nicely restored by, not me, someone else. They did a proper job on that one. This one I would not have re-erected. Mainly because these pieces are still missing, and the only thing that's holding that up is a thin veneer of mortar down there, and I'm afraid it's going to fall again. That's why a group should be making these decisions, not me. The Shelbys and the Rudisills were early people in Shelby County, and this plot definitely should be kept clean, these stones cleaned. That's another project out here that is a fairly easy project for volunteers to do, is cleaning these stones. There's a solution called D2. It's extremely expensive, about $75 a gallon, and it's the only thing that's recommended for cleaning stones other than water. A lot of people talk about the Shelby plot, but very few people make it back here. If they do make the effort to make it back here, it should look a little better than it does now, I think. The edges here are still sort of dangerous. There's some deep cuts. Someday I would like little viewpoints, kind of, because the view actually is beautiful. I mean, you see all the way to downtown from up here. This is the best view in Shelby County. But I want a canopy of trees across there. 1, to keep the erosion down, and 2, I don't want to totally lose the forested feel of the place. I want it to be maintained so that people aren't afraid to come in here, and that it looks respectful. I'd like to see this as a park with a trail around the outside, maybe a couple trails, walking paths on the inside, where people could come out and walk, could sit. It's so peaceful in here. And just to sit and meditate. It has so much potential for so many different things. I would love to give school tours out here. Elmwood gets thousands of school kids through there a year at $5 a head. I would settle for just 2 schools to come through here at $5 a head to show them what a rural cemetery in Shelby County looked like.